Hello and welcome back to our podcast episode number 5. Today we are going to talk about historical knitting and crocheting, and we also have a guest today, so stay tuned for that at the end of the video. But first, let's just jump in. And what have you done, Clara?
So one of my finished projects, which I finished in November last year, I think, is this sweater. I call it the Sportive Spirit sweater because it has a sportive touch to it. At least it looks a lot like these historical cycling sweaters that you see a lot at the moment on the internet. This one is self-designed, so I drafted the whole sweater using an Excel sheet, using my measurements and then grading it up. I started with this hem, so you start at the bottom and it's a pointed hem which resembles a lot of these vests from the 1890s. And the pattern is a cable-like pattern, so it's not actually a cable pattern, but it looks like one because you slip one stitch over two other stitches and then you knit up and you join the sleeves that you knit simultaneously, and then you just join everything and knit to the top. So it's quite simple in its structure and in its techniques, but I like it a lot. And I've worn it a lot these past few months when it was rather cold. I plan on making another one because it's not that perfect, because I didn't put any increases to it when knitting up, so it's quite loose around the waist. And it fits me when I'm just wearing my regular clothes, but when I'm wearing my corset, so we did a photo shooting last week where I wore my corset and then it's really loose around the waist. So I had to tuck the sweater into my skirt to look, to look decent for 1890s clothing. So that's why I'm planning to make one that is a bit more fitted.
I really love how you made these ruffles at the shoulder part. It's decreasing.
So you start at the hem of the sleeves and then you knit to the top. And I'm not sure if you see it on this camera, but it's seamless. So it's a seamless jumper.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize that.
So it's actually a raglan jumper with, in German it's called Sattelschulter. I'm not sure how to say it in
Saddle shoulder?
Saddle shoulder, I think. So which means that you have a very small piece at the shoulder part that goes right up to your neck. So what I did is just to have decreases at this point, really smooth decreases. So you have a slight gathered piece here.
I really love that. I have to make something with that.
It's a bit inspired by a design that I knit from Fable Knitwear. It's the Rowena jumper where she's making this exact same thing, that you knit the sleeves and then you gather it. But it's really decent, how do you say? So I looked up the word, it's discreet. So in her design, it's really just a very small piece of design, so you don't really notice it, I think. And I just wanted to do something bigger, a bit more historical looking. So this is why I have these big sleeves that are joined here in this small shoulder piece. But as you see, it's quite loose here. So it's also, it doesn't help, but it's also a cotton yarn. It's a cotton blend with yak yarn. So it doesn't help with the stretchiness. It's more loose than wool would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for your own made garment and the first of it, mean the first of this type.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing.
Thank you.
And I love the color.
Yes. I bought this yarn online. It's also, the yarn is from Katja, which is a Spanish knitting yarn company, I think. Yeah, I thought it would be more green, but it's more of a blue color.
Minty type.
Yeah, I would have hoped to be more of a minty color, but it's blue. But I like blue, at least light blue, so
yeah,
it's okay.
I'm just checking my own skin color with it, and I like it.
Thank you. Yes. That's my first done and delighted project, which I have finished in November, so I'm not sure if that really counts as a...
Why not? It's done and delighted.
Yeah,
No,
yes.
it's done and you're delighted.
Yes, that's it. So my next done and delighted is a vest, a historically inspired vest, which is this. The buttons are still missing, so it's not 100% done, but at least the knitting part is done. It's a knitting pattern from, I think her name is Lottie. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. On Instagram, she's called That Knitting Lady. And this is her first pattern that she published, I think, last year, around maybe March, April, May. It looks quite small, but it is a ribbed pattern, so it stretches quite a lot. So it fits. I used a alpaca silk blend for this by Drops, Drops Design, the yarn company. So it's really soft and really smooth.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely can confirm that. It is.
Yeah, but also the yarn is really fine. So knitting this with this type of yarn it wasn't that comfortable to me because my hands were getting really cramped with knitting this because it was so slippery and I had such fine needles for knitting this that it wasn't that comfortable to knit, at least with this yarn. But the pattern itself is very easy and simple to understand. You knit the back first. So this is just a rectangle, this piece from here. You knit this rectangle, then you separate for the shoulder pieces. So here is one strap, then you bind off for this part, and then that's the other strap, and then you knit those separately to this part. And then you do increases for the bust, and then you do decreases. And then you knit this using a German short row technique. And in the end, you sew the side seams together. So it's just, you start in the back, and then you do the front. So it's really a cool construction, I think. And also in this pattern you have different sizes, and then for each size you can choose your cup size. So it really makes sure to have both your waist part and your bust size fit to your body measurements, which was really cool. Yeah.
Especially if you think about, for me it's often the case that the back piece is too wide based on my bust size. But I have a rather narrow back and, well, a lot in front.
Yeah.
So often these pieces don't fit. And I think the idea of having two measurements, one the bust size and one the overall size, is quite a good idea.
And in this case, it's a 1x1 rib for the back. So the back itself stretches quite a lot, which would really fit to your measurement, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's quite flexible in its size.
Yeah. And what buttons do you gonna have?
I find buying and choosing buttons really, really difficult. It's my least favorite part. One of my least favorite parts when it comes to knitting and sewing, because it's so difficult for me. But I have these buttons here.
Ooh.
I think they are plastic. But
yeah, probably.
I really like them. Also, it's difficult to find buttons that look historical but not too old-fashioned.
Yeah.
So old-fashioned in a negative way, I'd say.
I also just bought some Mother of Pearls buttons, and they are so yellow in comparison to white fabric, for example. That's so difficult because with plastic buttons you get a really white one. So if you have something white and want white buttons, maybe glass buttons would be an option, but they are really heavy.
Ceramic?
Ceramic also. Have you ever seen ceramic buttons?
Yes, I think so. I'm not sure where, but I think they exist.
Yeah,
tell us in the comments if you know.
They exist, but I have never seen some to be bought.
I'm not sure. I think certainly there will be a place on the internet at least where you can buy
Yeah,
these
absolutely.
buttons. But these are rather small, but yeah, let's see. I'll put some pictures in when I'll be sewing them on in the next few days. Yes, so this was my project.
Everything done delighted.
Yes, at least everything that was historically inspired.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have anything in this category right now because I've already shown you.
in the last episode number 4, about fair knitting, and also in the very first podcast episode.
Yeah, the green sweater was in the very first one, yeah. Those are the two historically inspired knitting projects I have done.
Both your cycling sweaters.
Yeah, both are my cycling sweaters.
Have you shown your violet colored one already?
I don't think so, but I'm not happy with it, so it wouldn't fit the category done and delighted.
Done and unhappy. Let's make another category about this.
Done and unhappy. Yeah, it was actually the reason why I made the green one, because I wasn't that happy with the violet one. But
are you still wearing it day to day?
Almost never.
Oh, that's a pity.
Yeah, I thought about remaking it, or at least remaking the bodice, but I don't want to. I want to make other projects first. Maybe in winter again, but this winter I almost never wore it.
That's a shame, after all this work you put into it.
Yeah.
But if you're still interested in seeing it, I think you have a YouTube video on your own YouTube channel about it.
That's right.
Jump right to this.
There's
video.
the link.
Our next category is work in progress. So what are you working on at the moment?
At the moment, for 2 years now. I'm working on a combinations?
I think it's combinations.
So it's basically undergarment which is combined of a trouser or pants and the bodice. And I crocheted all those lace already 2 years ago. Since when I'm doing that?
It was, I think, one of your very first historical projects.
It was my very first. It was thing that got me started.
So it was, I think, 2020. At the end of 2020.
Then it's already 3 years. Oh my god. But yeah, and we said it's a work in progress because you see this one leg has lace and this one has none. So I have to still make this lace. I think it's 2 meters of lace I have to do.
For one leg?
For one leg, yeah. Each leg has 2 meters of lace. And this one is also just pinned on, so I have to make sure not to prick myself. But yeah, I'm not that motivated to work on it because the combinations have gotten too small.
Really?
Yep, they are slightly too small in the bodice, and that's really demotivating. But on the other hand, I really like this lace and I want to make something with it, so I really need to finish it. And right now I guess I have 5 of these squares I need for each lace, or for the lace, and I need 24 or something. So I have quite some pattern repeats to go.
Have you measured how long you take for one?
I think it was 1 hour, only the square. And then I have to add all these rows which are combining the squares. So this...
now I see. So you have this little square and then all
the rest is set in. And this took a lot of time. I don't really know what alone this lace was in a time measure. I know that the entire garment with all the lace was 200 hours until now. So that's also the reason why I don't want to abandon this project.
Can't you alter the bodice?
That's what I'm thinking.
Because you have it's gathered at the waist. So
yeah,
maybe you can. Is it too small at the waist or at the bust?
At the waist. So I would have to add some lace at the waist. I don't know if I can do that. I could try, or I also thought about just letting this be how it is, purposing the lace for another combinations, or maybe petticoat or whatever I could figure out. But yeah, that's the problem why I'm not working on it right now. Still, I really love it because it's so
tiny, everything's so detailed.
Yeah. And I love the working on it. Actually, when I work on it, I really love it. But thinking about it and knowing that it might not fit anymore, or I know that it doesn't fit anymore, really makes it sad. But on the other hand, I could redo one and take everything I learned from this one on another project.
Reuse the lace also that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'd
then
do
the
that.
time wouldn't be wasted. But yeah, I'm not sure yet. And the other thing is you won't see it because it's like undergarment, and putting all those 200 hours and more in an undergarment is something.
I mean, you're doing it for yourself, not for others.
Yes.
And you're still making pictures of this garment, even though it's an undergarment. So
That's true. On Instagram, I've seen a lady who said she made, I think, 20 undergarments because she was annoyed of washing day, because she almost had to cramp everything in one washing day because she had not enough undergarments, and now she has enough, so it's not that of a hassle anymore. And I found that really inspiring in one way, to just say, okay, I'm going to make my own collection of undergarments who work with together, and because I only have this combinations and one petticoat. So basically, if I want to dress historically, I always have to make sure that they are washed, they are pressed, they are whatever need, and then it has to fit the overgarments.
in what way? Does it have to fit?
For example,
You mean
the shape of the petticoat sometimes
yes, that's
influences the shape of the overskirt, so that would have to fit in certain eras. That's why I'm thinking about making more undergarments, but on the other hand, they are only undergarments.
I mean, I made a petticoat, a yellow petticoat with lace, also with bobbin lace that I made, and it's also, as a petticoat, it's an undergarment, but in a way you could also wear it for another garment.
Yeah,
I mean, you don't have to be that historically accurate when wearing your
yeah, that's
designs.
true. That's the advantage of living today.
Yeah, I mean,
but
also
yeah? Would you wear this on the streets, just putting that on and going out?
I'm not sure because it's white, and I'd be fearing to destroy it.
Yeah, okay.
But if it were to be another color, maybe.
Maybe in black. Maybe I should do
black,
one in
certainly.
black. Oh, in petrol. I love petrol.
Yes.
A petrol undergarment
With
or a
white
light blue.
It looks, I mean, in this color combination, it would look a lot like these bathing suits that you'd wear in the 1890s.
That's true.
These blue and white bathing suits.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes
maybe you
striped.
can do something that is a bit both.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it wouldn't be historically accurate because you would have separate garments each for a bathing suit and for a combinations.
Yeah.
But I mean, for yourself, in the end, you're doing it for yourself. So
true.
maybe.
That's an idea. I'm glad we talked about it. So that's a work in progress, and it will be work in progress for a while, I guess. Otherwise, I will tell you.
Yeah, but the lace is so beautiful. It would be a shame. One question I do have. You designed all this lace by yourself? Or is it based on historical...
It's a combination of both. This one is a pattern I found in an old book. I don't know which book because I just found the image online and not the entire book. But I know that it was based on the sketches and everything historically. And the one at the waist, this is a modern pattern which I actually mirrored in the middle so that I get those gaps because it was just a trim. And these I made up some things I had seen. The whole theme was to have something like ice.
How do you say? Icicle.
Okay, so the whole idea was to make it look a little bit like icicles or snowflakes, and that's how I designed the pattern at the sides, that you have always this little point, and somewhat geometrical patterns as well, but still organic. That was the idea, and that's how I made the lace for the upper garment. Yeah, and this one at the leg where the band goes through. There, I made a combination of the waistline and the above lace because I like the pattern and I still wanted to thread the satin band between it. And yeah, that's how I...
Would you still know how to crochet this lace? Have you written down the instructions?
Well, for this one, yes. Also for this one, but I have no idea how to make this. No idea. And I'm so... Okay, I think that's another reason why I don't work on it. Because I really don't know what
Bad
to do.
question, I think. I'm sorry.
No. You really should always write down what you're doing while you're doing it, because figuring out how this was done is so difficult and it's so annoying.
I think it would even be better to make a new design for both legs and reuse this one for another project, maybe.
That's actually a good idea. That's a really good idea. Because I think it's also wide enough that it would at least fit at the petticoat at the upper part. Maybe not the flounce or the bottom, but maybe it above the knee line or something. That's a really good idea. Ha! Ha! Now I'm motivated again.
That's nice.
Then I can take out all the pins and stuff. Oh, and then it would be done and delight.
So you show this for the next podcast episode.
Then it's done and delighted. We'll see next time it's done. Maybe I will see if I can make this alteration at the waistline to make it a little bit wider. But yeah, maybe that's a smaller task than crocheting all this and trying to figure out what I did here.
I think it would be nice to have a lace design that you just start with a small strip for the whole length and then you add on top. So that when you have the small strip, it's basically done because you have some lace, but you could still go any further.
Yeah.
But with this one, no, I think with a wide strip of lace where you crochet everything at once, then you'd have a lot of work at once.
Yeah, that's
rather
true.
than starting small and going in the other direction.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, kind of this lace is done this way. You have this rectangles. There you need a certain amount. Then the intersections are made in rows. So I could also have stopped without this petal design. But
You mean this petal design here?
Yeah. So I could have stopped earlier, but I didn't like it. But it's a really good idea to just let this lace be and restart with something else. That's a so smart idea.
But then you can add it to... Do you want to add it on your petticoat that you already made? Or for another one?
I would do another one because that one also already has its lace and it has...
It's a different kind of
flaws.
lace also, so
Yeah.
it might not fit.
Yeah, and it has its flaws, so... No, I guess this petticoat is done and I would rather do a new one.
What kind of thread did you use?
It's a DMC cotton crochet thread, and I think it's number 30, which you don't get anymore. So I have used that stock, which I found on eBay, and I think I used a 0.75 centimeter needle. Millimeter, yeah. Centimeter would be a little bit big. So less than 1 millimeter thick needle. And I found it quite interesting. If you buy nowadays number 30 crochet yarn, it is bigger and you can't knit it anymore with these 0.75 millimeter needles. You need a 1.25.
1.25, so it's even smaller.
No, it's wider.
1.25?
It's the bigger needle. One is 1 millimeter, one 2.5.
I was thinking about 0. No. 1.25, okay.
Yeah. Oh.
Why are they calling it the same then?
I really don't know. I thought First I thought it was about the decitax or the nummermetric.
The Dutch Matita.
Well, the thickness of the yarn in comparison to its length, but apparently it's not, and I don't know why. I now have quite a bunch of this yarn because I bought, as I said, dead stock. But once this is gone, I would not have the possibility to get it again.
I mean, you could try to get some bobbin lace thread for this.
Yeah, that's
to have
true.
some, because then you'd really have some fine threads.
Yeah, that's true. And there's also the number 100 crochet yarn that you can still buy. And this one is really fine. I would crochet it with 0.5 millimeter needles. But getting 0.5 millimeter knitting needles or crochet needles is quite difficult. I just found some, so I'm quite happy, but I don't want to break them because sometimes I break my knitting and crochet needles.
When they're made of metal, even?
Yeah.
Or
not while working with it, but while, for example, transporting. And there I have already broken one, so I have to be a little bit more careful, or getting a case or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be a good idea.
But if you know where to get some more of these fine knitting needles, especially knitting needles, maybe let us know, because...
Yeah. Also in Europe, if it's possible, because I know you get it in the UK, I have already seen there. But if you have to pay £2 for a needle and then 25 for shipping, that's quite out of proportion.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, that is this project. And what are you working on?
I'm working on a knitting project. I don't have any crocheting projects.
But you do crochet sometimes? Or
rarely. I did a striped vest, summer vest. Not a vest, it's a top, a summer top. But it's not done, and I don't enjoy crocheting as much as knitting. At least I'm not that fluent in crocheting, so it's a bit more. It does take a bit more concentration for me to crochet.
It's also for me. I would crochet something else, then I would knit. I wouldn't knit crochet a sweater, a plain sweater or something.
No. Sometimes I also don't like the way crocheting looks. So in lace, I do love crocheted lace. Also, Irish lace is beautiful, and I love to try it out one day. But fully crocheted pieces of clothing, they sometimes don't look that... I don't like them that much. But of course, everyone can do what they want, so it's okay. It also depends a lot on the pattern you use, the yarn you use, the shape that you use. So crocheting can be very diverse. But it's not my favorite thing to do, because knitting like this one is a lot more fun for me. So this is a work in progress of another inspired cycling sweater that I'm making. It's also a stash busting project, because I had this yarn that I wanted to use for something else originally, but it got too difficult for me, and then I wasn't motivated to start it, so I used it in something different. This is inspired by lace designs that you also have a lot in Edwardian blouses. So you have a strip of lace running up to your neck. So I wanted to imitate this in knitting. So this is a cable and lace pattern. So this is a repeat of a cable pattern and a lace pattern. It's quite simple, so nothing difficult in this one. I used a little detail. I haven't seen this before, but I think someone has done it before. It's when you do your ribbing and then go up to your bodice where you knit just a stockinette stitch. I used this yarn over pattern to have a little beautiful detail, which I really like. It looks a bit more flat when you hang it just around here, but when you're actually wearing the garment, then it really shows. And I really like this one. The sleeves are meant to be knit in another color. I already started one sleeve. It's in green, because also it's the same yarn, and I wanted to do a Fair Isle project made of both yarns. So now I have to use both yarns, but I think they go quite well together. So these are also puffed sleeve. These sleeves are sewn separately, and then the bodice is sewn separately. So now at this point I'm just knitting the front up to your neck, and then the back, and then sewing it at the shoulder, sewing it together, and then I'm sewing on the sleeves. I'm not that motivated to just finish it right now because I'm not sure how to tackle certain details, and I won't be wearing it before October maybe.
But then it would be finished for October.
Yes. The design also reminds me a lot of, now I'm again missing the word. I sent you some pictures of women doing sports, specifically fencing. The fencing outfits, just have a look on Pinterest or something. They are made usually of a white bodice piece, and the sleeves are made of black.
Yeah,
so
true.
It's a really cool design, I think. And they also had a little red heart, which I also love. I'd like to make this one. I'm not sure if the colors are that similar, but I love to make a fencing outfit. A green, yeah.
Green heart. The basic idea of having two colored pieces is really interesting.
And not that, I haven't seen one historical.
No, only
knitted garment. Even when you have normal, typical Edwardian blouses made of woven fabrics, you don't usually see two colored.
No, you usually have a vest and a blouse underneath. They could be different colors, but they are still two separate garments. I think it's a really cool idea. And yes, we would love to make a fencing outfit one day.
Yeah, even if we're not fencing.
We could learn it for that.
We could, yes.
Could be dangerous.
We have so much time. Not. Yes, so this was my project. So first I'd like to insert a video of a trip that I did in April around Easter time. I went to Normandy in France, to the area of Seine-Maritime. I spent a week there and I took my knitting, so this project here, I started this project, so enjoy this small trip to Normandy. So we decided to put another category into this podcast just because of the fun of it. It's about future plans. So have you any future plans in the realm of historical knitting and crocheting that you'd like to talk about?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this project is absolutely unrealistic. Because I really want to make one day a crocheted Irish lace garment. Well, not only garment, a dress actually, because I love them so much, and The first time I saw one was actually a modern one from Alexander McQueen. And I really loved the bodice he made with layering, and the skirt was not my thing, but the bodice is really beautiful. And I always thought about making this, and that's actually the reason why I started crocheting lace in the very first place. But I feel really taunted by the idea of making an entire garment, because you have to crochet each motif, is it a leaf or a flower, and collect them, and then you start piecing it all together and making the actual pattern pieces, and then you have to set them all together, and it feels like this would be a project of 1 or 2 years where I had to crochet every day actually. Of course you could put it in really tiny chunks and say, okay, I crochet only 1 flower a day, and this would accumulate. But on the other hand, do I sit down every day and crochet a little flower?
Why not?
And what if I don't like the idea 2 years from now? I think that's all excuses to not do it, but I'm really good in excusing myself and not doing something.
I mean, would you do just the whole dress or also just the bodice? You would make the whole dress.
I would make the whole dress.
With a bodice, for example, or with a skirt.
Yeah, I thought about starting with the skirt and making it in 2 pieces, so I could combine them with other garments and having a little more diversity in this project. But I'm putting it off so far that I don't figure out what I actually would have to do. I really would love to do it one day, because these garments are just so beautiful and there's so much labor and time in it. On the other hand, I'm also thinking, if you have spent that much time in a garment, when would you wear it? I mean, I don't have any occasion where to wear a white.
I mean, a white lace garment, it's a bit natural to wear it on a wedding, for example. So
yeah, I thought about making my own wedding dress like that, but I'm really scared of making my own wedding dress and not being pleased with it in the end.
I think as a person who makes your own clothes, who's so particular about different kinds of designs, for example, I think you'll never be that satisfied with the there are always something that can put you off. So
yeah, that's true. Maybe
you'd have to put this thought aside and just be proud of what you have done and achieved.
Yeah, possibly. That would reduce some stress in my life, I guess.
You'd never be happy about a bought dress, I think. If you bought your own wedding dress.
That's also true. And what I thought about, I mean, if you buy a wedding dress, you have it would most certainly be out of polyester, because I can't afford a dress of silk or anything that expensive. And if I crocheted it with cotton thread, I could, if I wanted, dye it. That would be a possibility. So you see, I thought about all that stuff, but I didn't thought about it in an actual productive way. Yeah, but that's my biggest dream project actually. For knitting, I don't have anything right now because I'm already knitting a big project.
Yeah.
Do you have any that big projects in mind?
Not that big. My future plan is a bit more realistic. Let's say a bit more specific also when it comes to when I start, what it is. And
you have already done the planning.
Yes. So this here is a vest that I made last year also, around May, June. I talked about it in our first podcast episode. I used the same pattern, you might recognize it from my other jumper that I showed you just earlier, which this imitating cable pattern. I'm planning on making another one because I made I wrote instructions and graded the whole thing, and because I was thinking about writing knitting patterns. So, but I'm in a way not feeling comfortable enough to publish it because I'm afraid that it wouldn't fit to other people. So I mean, this is the whole purpose of test knitting, but I'm still not confident of even starting test knitting. Maybe I'll give it a try once again. So I'm planning on knitting this once again to get back into what I thought about this pattern, to get back into the process of knitting, of making this vest. So also it happens to be Nani's birthday in the upcoming weeks. So I thought I myself don't need 2 vests. I'm doing other, but I wouldn't need another one of this first, maybe one day, but not now. So I'm making another one for Nani. So she is in the process of choosing the yarns. So yeah, this is my future plan. I think it would be a quite quick project because I know how to make it. So
Yeah,
it's just about the knitting.
You can basically prove your thoughts about the pattern and going through the pattern and see if you still understand what you did. I think that is a quite smart idea to get back into it and also seeing what might be written differently.
Yeah.
And of course, I would have a vest then, so that's pretty good for me.
Have you thought about a color? So you sent me some colors that you like, but
Yeah.
you want to talk about it?
I really like this mint colors, bluish green tints, but I also saw a red one I really liked.
I do have it here also. I sent Nani 2 yarns that would be suitable for this vest, and she sent me one color, and I happen to have it's this exact color, just one skein of this
Oui.
dark red. And what I also did to match the gauge, I knit 2 swatches in different needle sizes. These ones. So this is the first time that you're seeing it. So
Yeah, the color is amazing.
yes, it's a merino. I think it's a superwash yarn, so it's quite bouncy.
Yep,
It
actually
does
is.
have a beautiful properties, I think.
Yeah.
And the color is really dark and rich.
I love it. I guess I have just right now chosen the color.
This makes me think about keeping it for myself because I love the color too. Maybe I'll make 2 vests. One for me and one for you.
Then you have 3 vests. Well, then you have no excuse to publish the pattern anymore.
But we have quite similar sizes, so I think I will be knitting the vest for you in the same size by adding a bit of more width on the bust. So it doesn't, I'm not checking other graded sizes by doing this. So I'd still have to get in the process of test knitting. It's intimidating for me.
But it would be the next step.
Yeah. Also, your mother did test knit one size, and it was really helpful to have her give some feedback. And she also had some question, but it's a thing when you have your test knitting go over a few months, and then one of the test knitters has a specific question about one line, and I would have to get fully into it again just to answer this question, and it's taking a lot of brain work to figure it out and to remember what did I do in this line, what was I thinking, why is it different to what the test knitter says.
Yeah.
So
maybe it might be a good idea to make this test knitting while you're knitting yourself, that you're still in the process, but I don't know if that's getting too much also.
But then you would have to show your test knitters an unfinished piece and say, do you want to knit this? When the test knitter doesn't even know how it looks like in the end.
Oh, no, I mean knitting a second one. Once you have knitted one and then re-knitting one, but then you would always knit 2 pieces where you don't need the second one, so that wouldn't be...
I mean, you could sell it or you could give it to another person who has the same size. But again, I also knit for the fun of it and for having a new garment. So it's a bit, I would still want to have fun while knitting, and knitting a second piece every time
takes the fun out of it.
A little bit. I mean, we are all doing all this for the fun of it. It's not for gaining money in the first place. So
that's
also
true.
The test knitting process for me should be fun. So maybe one day. I mean, I'm stressed with university work at the moment, so I'm not thinking about starting this, but maybe one day. Let me know what you think. If you're interested in even having this pattern or not, maybe this will motivate me to actually get it done.
If you want to test knit,
yes,
would be also an option, because we need test knitters in such a case.
Yeah.
And of course, if you would like to have a pattern like that, that would be, I think, a big motivation.
Yeah, that's my project. The vest is called the Sportive Spirit vest. So it's similar to the Sportive Spirit sweater, which is the sweater that I showed you earlier.
You basically have all the work already done.
I even have like the InDesign layout done and written everything up and put everything into this. So the document itself is almost done. It's just with the grading that there were some, how do you say that? The grading steps are sometimes irregular when it comes from the Excel sheet. So I'm not really sure about this, if I've done it right or if I should have corrected some of these numbers.
I don't know.
I mean, we have had grading at university, but when it comes to sewing patterns. So grading knitwear is a bit difficult because you work in a different way. So when you have your sewing pattern graded, you define points on your sewing pattern, and then you say this point for our next size is growing 2 centimeters in the X axis and 0 centimeters on the Y axis. And with knitting, I'm having an Excel sheet and counting with rows and stitches, and it's quite different. So nothing that I did learn at university.
I didn't learn it either. I was just a textile designer. So the last point on our little list of reminders what we want to talk about today is our guest. It's Amber, and her Instagram name is?
It's Lady of the Wilderness on Instagram. I'm very happy that she agreed to be on this podcast. Enjoy this little trip to her projects and her inspirations and everything. And we'll see you next time.
So thanks, Amber, and bye.
Hello, Clara and Nani. Thank you so much for asking me to be part of the Textile Podcast. I was very excited to be part of it, and really glad that it's a beautiful day outside and that hopefully I can get some good footage for you guys of me and some of my projects in action. But for those of you who are listening along and who don't know who I am, my name is Amber Mendenhall, and I am a pattern designer, specifically historical patterns, and I'm also a historical fabric designer as well. I have a business called Virgil's Fine Goods, and you can find me there at virgilsfinegoods.com, or you can find me as Lady of the Wilderness on Instagram. So the beginnings of my historical obsession, I guess, with the clothing and textiles and all of that started when I was about 14. Prior to that, I was really into, historical dramas, Anne of Green Gables, all those sorts of like TV shows and films. And my mother was also very into them as well. When I was 14, I discovered that I could actually dress up and participate in that historical way, but also to help teach people, and I really am a teacher at heart. So at 14, I saved up a bunch of my babysitting money and ended up paying a really talented seamstress to make some costumes for me, and that way I'd be able to participate in American Civil War reenactments, which were all that were available around me at the time. So that kind of evolved, and I ended up going to college and decided to major in historical clothing and reconstruction, basically. So my specific focus was to figure out how to remake and reproduce clothing that was from those time periods. It landed me my business now, and it's amazing to be able to do a hobby as your business and to be doing that full time and it's been quite a journey. And I still get to do fun stuff of making costumes that I want to wear, as well as costumes that I want to pattern out and have in my shop for patterns. And you guys can make it at home. But we're not talking specifically about my just historical costuming journey. We're talking about knitting and crochet and all sorts of fiber works. So crochet has been part of my life since I was about 17. A woman that was close to my family taught me how to crochet, and it was really one of those like immediately addicting hobbies. It's portable, you're able to take it wherever you want, and it's also like kind of such a repetitive thing that you don't have to always think about it in the same way that you do when you're sewing or putting pieces together for a full garment. It's just a different animal entirely. So I started doing that, making hats and scarves and the typical early beginner things, and I quickly moved on to amigurumi. But at the same time that I was doing amigurumi, which are I was doing Star Wars amigurumi, when they were very large, I ended up actually hurting myself in the process. So I learned some really bad habits and decided that it was best for me to just give up crochet entirely, and and that's what I did. And I immediately noticed that my hands were improved. I used to play piano professionally too, so it made a big difference in how I was able to continue with piano if I weren't going to be crocheting. So fast forward to 10 years, which was about 2 years ago is when I started to pick up crochet again. And this time it was because I was interested in Tunisian crochet, and I figured that I might as well kind of brush up on my skills with regular crochet. But during this time I stumbled upon archive.org, I think it's called, and there are several antique books that are like knitting and crochet related, and the one that I happened upon was the Columbia, now I forget what it's entirely called, but it's like the Columbia Knitting and Crocheting book from 1907, and or the Columbia Book of Yarns, that's what it's called. And yeah, so I found a really cute pattern that I thought, maybe I could make that, and I had yarn in my stash from the 10 years prior that I had been crocheting a lot. So I very feverishly started to crochet it up, and I ended up doing 2 versions of that pattern, because with historical patterns, especially with knitting and crochet, there's no real gauge, which is really, I think, the biggest challenge in trying to replicate knitting and crochet and all those sort of fiber arts. You don't know exactly what they were talking about, other than sometimes they give a bust size for the pattern that you're working on. And that really was a big challenge for me as being quite a novice crocheter and stepping back into this whole thing again. And the only indication of what the size was or the gauge was going to be the bust size, and that's really hard to figure out. So I was able to kind of calculate, I don't even remember how big my gauge would end up being with my yarn and everything to recreate this pattern. So I did my mock-up version, which was as written, with no alterations or anything for myself, and then the plan was to then make one for myself based on how that one was going to fit. And I was able to do that, and it's one of my favorite pieces that I've ever made, honestly, for historical clothing, because it really has just a really down-to-earth feel, even though I understand that, in the Edwardian era, they weren't always using these for everyday use. It's more for like sporting. But when I was wearing it, I was able to wear it when I went to Prince Edward Island, which is where Anne of Green Gables is set. And I really did feel in wearing that outfit that I was closer to what people wore back then or up there in Canada than I could be otherwise. And it was really just a delight to be able to recreate that and wear it. So it was a very interesting experience trying to figure out what the brick stitch, which is what the modern equivalent of this particular vest is. You're using a brick stitch pattern, and doing that and just kind of figuring all that out. And then after that, I got the bug of knitting, and I started right before Christmas. I taught myself how to knit thanks to YouTube, and I found a woman here in the United States that makes knitting belts, which are used in Shetland, and she makes them here, and I was able to get all the stuff with that and help to preserve my hands, because when you're using a knitting belt, you're not holding everything in the same way that you are with other knitting styles. So I knit English style. I'm technically a thrower, but it's like a mix of throwing and flicking. And that belt really helps with my speed and the ergonomics. I can sit and knit all day and have no issues with my hands. I happened upon that because of Hazel Tyndall. She has an Instagram, and she also has like a whole like knitting course and all these things. She does Fair Isle knitting. And it was really fun to kind of pick that up and figure out how to do that. So when I figured out how to knit, I spent about 2 or 3 weeks just doing swatches. And then after that, I did the same process of making a mock-up as written from the pattern, but the same book, the 1907 Columbia Book of Yarns, had a sweater that I was really excited to make, and I did. So I made the version as written, and then I made a version to fit me, and the whole process of that, being a beginning knitter and taking on a sweater as the first thing, was quite ambitious, but I'm very proud of how they turned out. I don't have the buttons set on them quite yet, so it's not 100% finished. And I think I still need to weave in the ends of the one that's to my size. But there's still just really cool pieces to be able to recreate, because we know that at least one was made for the pattern book itself. I don't know how prevalent they would have been at the time, but for people to have worn every day, but it really is just kind of fun to do that kind of experimental archaeology and recreate them for my own wardrobe. So yeah, that's kind of the basis of my fiber arts within the historical realm, because prior to that I was into doing other things. I'm mostly interested in doing sweaters and like full garments if possible, and I would like to start going back further and further into the historical patterns, and in time, like possibly to the 1840s and whatnot, to see and make some of the stuff that people would have worn and presumably made back then, because it really is such fun, and it's so addicting. Now, to answer a couple of your questions, what's a dream project in terms of knitting and crocheting? I don't really have a dream project, because for me, it's all about just kind of the journey of getting there. So I just want to make as many things as I can, and I use knitting as almost an escape. Having a historical business, or having a business that is based in my hobby, which is historical costuming, it can get really tiring, and you can easily burn yourself out. And what I like about doing knitting and crochet is it helps me decompress, but also doing it within the realm of my hobby, because it is still my hobby. I still love it, and I still have a passion for it. But because I'm doing these things for myself, I'm just making a thing, and I'm able to use it afterwards, rather than a lot of the costumes and clothing that I make from historical eras. They're not always as functional garments that I can wear every day. That's kind of, I don't have a dream project necessarily, but I just hope to be able to continue with it. And I think that the knitting belt really helps with that, because I don't experience any fatigue in my hands or otherwise. And I can take it with me wherever I need to go. I've got 2 small children, and they like to go to the park, and so we'll go to the playground or the park, and they will run around and do their things, and I'll just sit there or walk while I'm knitting, because the belt kind of holds all of that weight up and I don't have to hold it with my hands. So my favorite costuming era or style is, I would say, the 18th century. I like the 80s, I guess. I like the 1680s, the 1780s, the 1880s, the 1980s. I really just love how it's usually almost like a turning point in the way that fashion at the time is going. For the 1780s, you really see this difference of this very prim and proper, upright, very straight type of, an angular type of shapes that move into these softer shapes that finally give way into the Regency. I just find the 1780s to be really, really interesting, and that's why a lot of our patterns are for 1780s currently at my store. And then with the 1980s, you've got, this whole difference in shifts and undercurrents of cultures and subcultures, and I really enjoy seeing the differences in the socioeconomics and how all of that comes into play, because everything influences fashion and fashion also influences everything. So it becomes this kind of like circular, almost Inception type of deal that I really just enjoy trying to find it out. My advice for fellow costumers or new costumers, people that are coming to the hobby, is to not be discouraged at the things that you are learning to do, because I think that a lot of us get hung up on the fact that it's not perfect. And when you look at antique garments and things in museums, you'll quickly find out that people back then weren't perfect either. Even if they were a professional maker, and in that sense a tailor or a dressmaker, everybody has kind of a ceiling or just an amount of things that they aren't that great at, and sometimes you just make do. And a lot of times, I would say a majority of the time, when you're looking at a historical garment, they didn't do it perfectly either, and they didn't care, quite frankly. So as long as your garment is functional and it makes you happy, and you are proud of the other things that you've done on it and how it looks and how you feel when it's on your body, I really don't think you should stress over making sure that every fine detail is perfect, unless that's your jam. For instance, I get inspired by making things as closely to the original as possible, and that includes the mistakes that they made. So for me, it's a different type of thing, because I enjoy the replication. I'm not creative in that I can just conjure up some sort of design. I would never consider myself a fashion designer. That's why I'm a sewing pattern designer, because I can take a pattern from an original garment, transcribe and make it into a saleable piece of functional, work that somebody else can use and make things from. So don't be discouraged with the things that you're working on, and really just try and take joy in the journey. And there's so many areas of historical costume that we can explore, that you should really just enjoy the whole process of it, and share it with the rest of us, so we can also get to see your amazing garments. So I think that's about time for me. But again, thank you, Clara and Nani, for inviting me to be part of the Textile Podcast. And I hope that you guys will come visit me on the Instagram at Lady of the Wilderness. And I also have a Virgil's Fine Goods Instagram as well. And you can find all of my information there, or at virgilsfinegoods.com. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and happy knitting, crocheting, or happy making. Bye.